So for this session, we're going to be setting up the character to correctly flinch. That means that whenever you get hit, we want to have a reaction. Now there are ultimately two types of reactions I would like to add to the game. I would like to have both the ability to get hit and flinch, as well as the ability to have a pulling your sword back kind of animation whenever a hit is kind of deflected. So we have animations for both of those things, but for the time being, I'm just going to be setting up the flinch animations. So if you go to your assets and you type in flinch, you'll see that we have player flinch big and player flinch small. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to play player flinch big if you get hit while you're in the end attack sequence. Okay, so this is going to play if you are currently finishing an attack. That way, if you mistime your attack, you've got kind of punished for it. Player flinch small is what I'll play generally the rest of the time. So we've got those two in there. I'm going to go to, first off, right click on here, and I'm going to create a anim montage. And I'm going to call this just player flinch. So we've called it player flinch. And now that we've got that set up, I'm going to double click it. And you can see at the moment that it's just kind of not doing a whole lot. If I hit play, she'll do that, but it's in the default slot. So I'm going to change this to the upper slot because I actually don't mind if my legs don't do anything specific. I'm going to add in the player flinch small animation asset, so just drag that in. Add a new montage section, which is just going to be called flinch big. You'll notice that when I do that, it's kind of it's put both of these on the same location. I'm going to delete defaults. So default is there right now. I'm going to delete it. And instead I'm going to go over here and add a new montage section that's called flinch small. So we have flinch big and flinch small. At the moment it thinks it's meant to play them one after the other, but I don't want that. I want them playing independently of one another. So I just click on that little X. We've now got them as separate things. So I'm going to click save. And now it's time for us to quickly add some feedback, which means we're going to go to our character blueprint. And now that we're in our character blueprint, what we're going to be doing is setting it up so that in this any damage section, we go through, we subtract the health. If health is less than or equal to 0, we play the death sequence. But in my situation, I don't just want to play the death sequence, I also want to go about, if we survive, I then want to play a hit montage. So the issue here is that I need to play the anim montage on the character, but I need to make sure that the anim montage section that I'm playing is correct in relation to the type of hit that we're taking. So it's a big one if we're in the end section or not. So the nicest way for me to kind of go about doing that is going to be to create a quick check that we see if there's a current anim montage playing, as we did before, we can look at the section and say, well look, if we got hit while the animation is playing and it's not an attack, then it's currently one of your weak periods. So if that's the case, we're going to go off and compare that and play a big hit or a small hit. So I'm going to copy all of this information here, so mesh, anim instance, active, and current selection that we had before. And I'm just going to paste them down here. I just hit Control B instead of Control V. There we go, Control V. So after we go into that, I'm going to branch. And all I'm going to say is, currently, is the attack montage playing? Now, if it is playing, what we're going to do is see if we're currently playing an attack move or not. And if we are playing an attack move, then I'm going to just play the smaller one. And if we're not playing an attack move, but it is playing, then I'm going to play the big one. So it's only at the end of the hits that if you get hit. And part of the reason for this is down the track we're going to change this logic around to also have blocking playing. So we'll go through that and we'll have that all set up reasonably soon. But what I'm going to do is first off create that list that's going to check the names against the list of attack moves. So how I can do that is I can create an array of names. So I'm going to call this attack moves. And the type is going to be set to name. And I'm just going to click on that button there to make it an array. And I'm going to add the two attacks that we've already got in the game. Attack 2 and attack 1. Great. So the reason I've created that array is that, first off, is this currently playing? If that's false, then that's fine, because if it's false, then we know that what we want to do is play the flinch montage, and we want to play flinch small, I believe it was called. Let me just confirm. So we want to play flinch small. And if it's true, we're now going to say, okay, contains, is the current section that's playing one of my attack moves? And if that's false, so if that's false, then we'll assume it's one of the bigger weak points. So I'm going to drop this in and set that to be flinch big. So we're going to be playing this one up here. So plug that into false. And once again, we don't need to worry too much about what's going on here, because that's all death. However, there is one other little thing that I would like to do. We're going to create a variable that sets it up so that we can't attack while we're flinching. So see, try melee at the moment is kind of set up there. What we're going to be doing is setting up this with a branch. And I'm going to create a variable for this called isFlinching. And if they are flinching, we don't want to be able to attack. But if they aren't flinching, we do want to be able to do the attack. So isFlinching is now in there. And what I'm going to do is, when we go to play one of these animations, we're going to set isFlinching to true. And this section here, if I type delay, by dragging off of this float, this return value is the length of the animation that's going to play. So by dragging off of that, I'm actually able to tell it that, you know, after this many seconds, we set isFlinching to false. Now, this is going to work. It's got a couple of issues that could potentially pop up, such as if I get hit twice in different ways, those delays will still play off. So we probably want to do that with a timer that we can kind of clear and pass around. But for the time being, that's going to be enough to have this system somewhat working. So I'm going to go in here, I'm going to hit play. Now, the last thing I needed to do, by default, isFlinching should be set to false. So you can see that's, I can now attack. And if I run over to you and I hit her, we've ended up with a bit of an issue. So a little issue from what we've just created is I forgot to account for one little thing, which is by telling it that isFlinching is here, you need to make sure that at the end of every outcome here, there's some way for isFlinching to be set back to false again. So at the moment I created the issue whereby if you hit them while they were hitting you, this would go through, and isFlinching would never be set to false. So I'm actually just going to set that up there. Now, when we add blocking in, which is two attacks hitting one another, this should never get called because it'll get caught before we deal damage. But this is really all we need for the time being to have that working. So if I hit compile and save, I'm now going to change one other little thing. And what that thing is if I go to play a flinch, at the moment the blend time is quite high, it's 0.25, and I really want this to be a very low blend time. So we want to go straight into that flinch. So I'm going to hit save now, and when I go into it, we should be able to see the player flinch when hit. So you saw her get hit once then, and now I'm falling over and dying. Now, that actually changes one other thing for us that we should consider, which is we currently don't enter flinching when we die, and the reason we want to do that is we want to make sure that we can block attacks when we die as well. So after this do once, I'm just going to set isFlinching to true and make sure that that's all correct. compile save, and we should no longer be able to attack when we die. Cool, that's mostly sorted. The other thing that I'm going to now go ahead and quickly tweak is, at the moment the player is, their camera is snapping in and out, and the reason their camera is snapping in and out is the mesh. By default, we've got two things that can potentially block the camera traces. So if you look here, this is currently set to block those, and I think it's okay for ours, but we probably want to make sure that the spring arm on our character isn't actually being assessed from this low. Instead, I'm going to move my spring arm up to be assessed from about this height. This way, anything getting between me and the arm at this low level isn't going to cause the popping in and out whenever the sword hits. So if I get back to this, now when she hits me, my camera's not popping around and I'm dying. There's one other little thing I'm sure you can notice is that as I die, if I spin my mouse, the character is still rotating to position. So I'm quickly just going to tweak that as well, and then we should have most of the hit system in place. So to tweak that system that we have, I'm going to load up my player controller. And in this section where we rotate to the mouse, so we rotate to the location, I'm only going to do that if my pawn is still alive. So at the moment I'm getting the control pawn, but I actually want to cast this to a character. And the reason I'm casting it is so we can check the health. So I can actually just make this an AND. So if health is greater than 0 and this is returning true, so I can just do the AND symbol. So if those two conditions are true, then process movement, but only if both of those conditions are true. Plug that in, compile save. And now, there's me getting hit, and you'll notice that I'm no longer spinning to my body, I'm just falling down on the spot. And that's all we needed to do. So we've now got all of our basic hits in. It's time for us to start extending the functionality so that we've got a little bit more than a sword.